What's good, YouTube fam? It's your boy Tony, aka Descendant of Chaos and Controversy, and I know it's been a minute since I've done one of these videos, and what more better time and opportunity for me to come back to talk about this. So, Candace Owens and Kanye West decided to go on social media and wear these sweatshirts that have the title White Lives Matter. Now, before you jump to the conclusion saying that, oh, you must be anti-white, da 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 da, it figures that a person like you would have a problem with it. No, I don't have a problem with the quote or the phrase "White Lives Matter." What I do have a problem with are those that are advocating and promoting this apparel. It's the individuals behind it who I have a problem with. Okay. In regards to White Lives Matter, it's a condescending rebuttal to Black Lives Matter coming from these individuals, Candace Owens, and those that support her, and those with the likes of Brandon Tatum. Kanye West is just another topic altogether wrapped up in some nonsense. Um, but if I was to give substance, some context behind why I believe White Lives Matter, well, first I got to start off with why Black Lives Matter came into play in the first place. Okay, it was a call to point out the injustices that the black community has had and have had throughout the history of time with law enforcement. And finally, a light was shed on the issue due to the protests, which, kind of like really catapulted when a particular football player took a knee. And that was controversial all within itself. And I know a lot of people felt that it was disrespect to America, the anthem, the vets, or anything that you could find a scapegoat to say this person was downright disrespectful. But all that diversion, all that deflecting really was just a mere insight to the ignorance to just blatantly say, we don't want to know. We don't care. We don't give a fuck. It doesn't affect us. Really? Okay. So I'm going to let that rest right there. Now, you know me, I like to balance the scales. As I advocate for and I promote and I shine light on the injustices to talk about the well deserved and just grievances that is discussed, that's often downplayed and met with such fucked up rhetoric towards the black community. I had to make the comparison that how the Martin Luther King says what affects one directly affects everyone else indirectly. That's what he said, right? Okay. So with that being said, I decided, and this kind of pissed off some black people, but for those with, they understood where I was going with this. Just to kind of, how should I say, in the interest of fairness, say, okay, let me entertain this. So, with that being said, I questioned Brandon Tatum when he wanted to talk about the whole White Lives Matter and him rooting for his sister Candence Owens and stuff. I said, okay, you know, but here's my question. If white lives really mattered, why you were so busy entertaining this anti-black rhetoric, always jumping at the opportunity of just dogging black people out when it comes to their engaging law enforcement and stuff. How come you never covered the stories when it came to white people who were unjustly killed by law enforcement? Let me run down a list, okay? Justine Damon, white woman. This happened in Minneapolis, if I said that correctly. Um, There was a situation in her neighborhood which had her call 911. And upon them arriving to the scene, she had came out in her nightgown, to approach the officers to say, "Hey, I'm the one who made the 911 call." Upon her approaching the squad car, the officer decided it was a bright idea to pull out his pistol and shoot through the window of his patrol car at this woman, killing her. That was one example. The other example, which I've covered many a times over and brought up as a talking point, was Ryan Whitaker, who recently I just saw the story where his family was awarded 3 point something million dollars for his death of another unjust interaction with law enforcement, where it resulted in this man getting killed by police. He had just finished coming from his daughter's graduation. Him and his girlfriend was in their own apartment complex. Now, mind you, there was a lot of disturbances where people were going around banging on doors, harassing people, this, that, and everything else and stuff. So, of course, when police came and banged on his door, Ryan thought it was okay. I'm dealing with these fools again, just being mischievous. So when he answered the door, he answered the door with his gun down because he didn't know. When he took a moment to observe and see that it was law enforcement, as if anybody could look at the video, Ryan Whitaker, you could see where he had one hand up, the pistol still down by his hip, not aimed at the cops, not threatening him in any way. He was like, oh, put the gun down. Complying, kneeling down to put the gun down, cops in front of him, cops behind. Boom, 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 boom. Killed. Girlfriend, come on, what did you shoot him for? Cops being who they are, insensitive as fuck. Shut the fuck up, get the fuck away. Da, 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 da. Why did you shoot him? Okay. I don't see no protests or no white outrage behind that situation. And this was a legal registered gun owner. Now, for those, let me take a moment right here. For those who advocate for the Second Amendment and say we have the right to bear arms and stuff, why is it always, and I'm taking black people out of this particular equation. This was a white man. So if a white man can't answer his door in defense of protecting whoever is behind him, to say, oh, okay, it's law enforcement and it's compliant and still get killed, what does that say? Because the message that I'm seeing is that, oh yeah, you're allowed to have a firearm legally, but here's what the consequences of that is going to be. If law enforcement shows up and are in your presence and they choose to engage you and you have a weapon, you're gone. No due process, no questions asked, just your ass is erased. And that's exactly what happened to this individual. Don't get mad at what I said. Be mad at the situation because it was fucked up. Okay. Hunter Britton, 17-year-old. Him and his buddy, early in the morning, his truck broke down, having mechanical issues. I covered this story as well. I've had many people from his town thank me for covering the story because they said we don't get enough exposure for things or stories like this that happen within the white community. I said, by all means, you are very welcome. This kid, cruiser comes up because, sometimes, if you're stranded on the side of the road or whatever, you have cops that come up and, hey, are you okay with it, whatever, boom, boom, boom. Not in this situation. I don't know what the cops' deal was. There was some kind of rumors going around. I'm not going to entertain it because I don't know if it's true or not. But what I do know is, as a fact, this cop came out. Hunter knew that his car, if he got out and his brakes or putting it in park didn't prevent his truck from staying parked, he had to put something behind the tire to keep the truck from moving. He came out with a bottle of antifreeze to put behind the tire. That was the intent. I don't know what kind of training law enforcement or police or those that go through the police academy go through, but it seems like anything from a cell phone, a comb, antifreeze, or what have you, is deemed as something dangerous and it causes the cops to fear their lives to where they have to take it upon themselves to make a split second decision to say, hey, antifreeze is going to kill me. Bow. Killed a 17-year-old white boy. Unjustly. And you want to know the only reason why he got fired is because his body cam wasn't active throughout the whole incident. Not because he was negligent and killed somebody unjustly, but because his body cam wasn't active during the whole time. So a white life didn't matter in this case. Daniel Shaver, we all know this story. Because this one, So there was a disturbance call in the hotel. These law enforcement show up, SWAT, whatever. Gave Daniel Shaver all these fucking orders to follow. Sitting there on his belly, hands up, dude yelling at him, boo doo 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 doo. One fatal mistake that Daniel Shaver made was trying to adjust his shirt while he was crawling on the ground, trying to follow the commands of an officer. Got executed. Cop was acquitted. Yeah. John Hurley. I'm sure y'all remember this. This wasn't too long ago. John Hurley was a hero. So much for being a hero when you got incompetent cops who respond and don't know friend from foe. Okay? Because again, if you have a weapon in your hand, automatically you're the enemy. Okay. So John Hurley ended up being one of these good Samaritans to where there was this deranged fool who decided to engage with law enforcement because his intent was going out to kill police. Okay? There was one casualty, yes, on the side of law enforcement to where it prompted John Hurley to step in, disarm this dude, and take him out. The responding officer who just came in, guns blazing, killed John Hurley. The suspect was already down, gone, taken out the picture. The lives of many other officers who we planned on kill were saved. John Hurley, yeah. Henry Berry was dealing with a mental health crisis. Yeah, called the cops, said something about the wife had his son or whatever, son was gone or missing or whatever, and the cops showed up various times. On this last time that the cops responded, they asked him to come out. He said no. Now clearly this guy was dealing with mental issues and stuff. Responding to a wellness check, the officers that responded ended up killing this guy. Now, the only thing I can say about this, which was justified, the cop that was responsible for killing Henry was brought up on manslaughter charges and is serving time now. So when it comes to me giving the example of those in the white community where I could say, yeah, I can advocate for in regards to white lives actually mattering, in regards to their engaging law enforcement and the unjust killings behind and them voicing their grievances, yes. But I gave examples. Candace Owens wouldn't cover this story. Brandon Tatum wouldn't cover these stories. They know nothing of these stories. Why? Because it's a conflict of interest. Because if they did cover these stories where it was white people at the ass end of the situation in dealing with law enforcement, that's a conflict of interest because now you have to admit the incompetence of law enforcement and that there needs to be a change in policy. Okay? Now, I'm going to give my personal experience on some things from what I've seen in regards to my point of view on the whole White Lives Matter situation in comparison. I stated before that I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut. Um, you had certain towns that divided from like the north end, the south end, the east, and the west. So in particular areas, you had these rich uppity, because that's where Yukon is and all that others, and Storrs, Connecticut, and all that other shit. New Britain, Connecticut, and so on and so forth, whatever. And yes, I grew up in the era where the gang violence was becoming more and more intense and growing and stuff, and the intolerable ignorance of these mindless asshats going around terrorizing their own and others and stuff, and then looking at how law enforcement was dealing with any person of color as if everybody was gang affiliated, which whatever. But anyway, I've seen many people who I grew up with and chose to take the wrong turn and ended up getting killed, murdered, or what have you. Okay, leaving that element and moving to where my parents ended up moving to, which was Colchester, Connecticut, was a predominant upscale society. The town was predominantly white, had rich people that lived there. My parents did pretty well to where they could afford to live in this area. What I've seen there in comparison, that the parents really weren't there for their kids. Instead, how they showed love, they spoiled them with cars, vehicles, four wheelers, this, that, and everything else. And what I saw was these kids would go out into the woods, have their little drinking parties, smoking weed, doing ecstasy, and whatever, doing a little bit of coke, whatever. This is what these white kids were into. And some of who I worked with, a couple of friends of mine, they were coming home from a party one night. Excuse me. And one of them had a truck and he had quite a few of his friends riding in the back. And they were coming down because how Colchester set up, they have a lot of back roads, back dirt roads and stuff to get from point A to point B or what have you. And he lost control, hit the ditch, and his truck flipped over, and he ended up getting killed and killed many of his friends, and there was only like maybe a couple that survived. So how I saw white kids that were dying in their community was through a lot of fatal car accidents. Um, a lot of them were dealing with depression. So there was a couple of suicides that I've heard of where they would get into a deep state of depression when nobody was around. They took a gun and ended their life. Um, Other examples that I can say that are validated as a point of reference would be a lot of white people families go through domestic abuse. You got all these cases where the husbands are beating up on the wives, beating up on the kids. The kids are going to school with bruises and stuff like that, which adds to the depression and self-esteem and what have you. Uh, and then you have like parents that take it to the extreme, and if they're having an affair, and there are countless stories of these, where they would take it to the extreme of killing their wives, their wife, or and their children. Um, you deal with white people who have a lot of DCFS, CPS involvement in their lives. The kids are taken away. You know that a lot of these agencies have their hands in child trafficking. Okay? There's a great deal of homelessness that plagues the white community, where a lot of these people that were successful at one time, for some reason, people act as if the pandemic wasn't a thing that caused a lot of people to be homeless because they ended up being jobless. But somehow we just kind of swept that up under the rug because we can't talk about anything dealing with the pandemic. Um, then you got the opioid crisis. You got a lot of these people that are hooked on heroin, meth. Here in Dixon, that's like crazy. There's been a couple of houses that was brought up in the news that got blown up because they had meth labs in the basement or whatever. There was one incident in Polo that another meth lab was raided and shit like that. All white people. There are various trailer parks that are in these towns or whatever, all occupied by white people. Um, some of these kids that don't have a lot, that are, going day by day with the bare minimum, and their families are on welfare and food stamps, link that and everything else. They go to school and have to deal with bullying and stuff like that. Now, I know there was a lot of negative, how should I say, stereotypes that was applied to the black community. But I also did a video talking about standing on common ground. See, there's a lot of these things that I pointed out that plagues the white community that black people can relate to. Okay? So, if I sit here and I can say I empathize and see in comparison where we're not that different, but because somehow we entertain stupidity and ignorance, why does it seem like there's very few far and in between individuals such as myself that could see shit for what it is? Lay it out before you. Give perfect examples of validated points, and the shit still go over many of you motherfuckers' heads. Willful ignorance. And it's a choice. Okay? So, for those who claim that I'm so anti-white or whatever, I pay attention to detail. I'm surrounded by white people on a daily basis. I hear the discussions that they have. They're not happy when it comes to looking at how the country is being run, how there is so much money being offered as aid to everybody else, but when it comes to natural disasters or vets or people in need, we are told that there is no help for us, even though we put our blood, sweat, and tears into the taxes and the time and energy and whatever, but we're told we don't matter. Now I'm speaking as us as a collective, as Americans. But for everybody else, you sitting there getting mad at fucking Mexicans and illegal immigrants and shit like that. Oh, these fucking not speaking English. But you ain't say shit about fucking Ukraine. Or any of these other foreign countries that are giving billions upon billions of dollars of aid. But then turn around and say, we're broke. There's no money for the Americans. How is there no money for us Americans, but there's money for everybody else? And then you getting all fucking huffy and puffy and mad at the wrong fucking thing. Something to think about. Something to think about. And I'm going to leave you with this thought before I depart from this. White lives matter, but it seems like it only matters when black folks speak on their behalf. And it becomes a problem. But where are the white voices to speak on their behalf when injustices are done to them? Because like I said, it seems like white people in the white community are just acceptance or tolerable of the shit that is projected onto them. And then turn around and want to point the finger at black people to say that they are the problem. But when we respond to that bullshit, then it becomes stop blaming white people for everything, but it's no problem for white people to point the finger at black people at any and for all fucking reason. We have been the scapegoats for the bullshit in this fucking country. And when we stand up for ourselves, we are told to shut the fuck up. But then when shit happens to y'all, we look like, Understand, when I brought up the whole point about segregation, it brings me back to this point. There's a common ground that we stand on. Why is it that white folks were given value based on the color of their skin to give them the privilege to exclude us? Just to make them feel as if they were worth something. While all the while, white people weren't worth shit to those who put the into play. Think about that. Anyway, that's all I got for tonight. Until next time, until next video, peace.